Hey friends, welcome to the Africa Pod, where we talk to Africa's disruptors and innovators, the lions and lionesses of Africa, as I like to call them. Today, we are incredibly honored to have Petina with us, who, as you know, is an award-winning writer who cringes every time someone says award-winning because she doesn't like it. She thinks that's not how her work is supposed to be to be recognized. But we'll talk about her books today. We'll talk about, her work and her many day jobs that she has had. Let me just start from here, Petina. I mean, you were born in Zambia. You grew
Yes,
up in Zimbabwe.
yes.
Has there been a point at which Zambia has called you and they said they really think they made a mistake to let you go? They would like you to come back and offer you some dual citizenship of some sort.
No, I ran for thank you so much, by the way, TB, as I call you, Tafazgo. Thank you so much
Of
for
course.
this wonderful invitation. And I love that first sentence about being a disruptor, because I feel that's kind of the thing that I do. I
Right.
disrupt systems, I disrupt things, and I've been a pioneer so many times over. I can't even begin to tell you what it means to be a disrupting pioneer. So thank you so much for inviting me. As you say, I was born in Zambia. I was born in Kitwe on the Copper Belt. My father worked there. And 9 months later, we went back to then Rhodesia. And I love the fact that I'm one of the few Zimbabweans who was born on independent African soil.
Of course.
Everybody else was born in Rhodesia. I was born, in the born freeze. We were born on
Yeah,
independent.
except for us, the Bond Freeze. Yeah.
Exactly, exactly. So I consider myself a forerunner of the born freeze, right? Um, but I have worked with the government of Zambia actually, and they're always very delighted to hear that I was born in Kitwe. I had many friends in Zambia, and for the longest time, I was convinced that I had been swapped at birth. I was convinced that somehow my mom took the wrong baby home because I didn't seem to look like anyone in my family. And then as I grew older, I became the carbon copy of my dad's younger sister. So that sort of like put paid to that romantic idea of having a Zambian Vemba speaking family somewhere.
Right, right. No, no, totally understand. I mean, I would say this. I mean, your early years are very well documented, and how books were important to you. And you talked to Trevor 5 years ago in an interview that I completely love. And I remember you talking about books and how sort of the transition just for you to move from Glenora to Marlborough was sort of quite instrumental. Talk to me about sort of like the early formative years and your love for literature and how obviously you managed to have this skill where you say you don't read this way, like all of us, you read this way. I've tried to do that, by the way. I've failed. I just can't.
Well, allow me to turn to my manuscript collection here
Mhm.
because I want to just pick this for you. So
Right.
this interview is coming at the wrong time. This is my memoir.
This is heaven is a library. I mean, you have been
Yeah,
talking about this forever, and we're
and
all looking forward to it.
it is, where is it? Oh, there it is. It is longer than my PhD thesis, right?
Wow.
So that tells you it's quite long. It's just about 150,000 words. It's called Heaven is a Library. And in it, I document my passion for reading and how basically my life was changed by books, and
Yeah.
especially by books in libraries. And as you say, just those 20 centimeters moving from Glenora, 20 centimeters on the, no, 20, sorry,
Kilometers.
20 minutes drive
Okay,
from
20 minutes.
Glenora to Megore. Just those 20 minutes just completely changed my life because I moved from a township school, Chembira and I, those were my first two schools. I moved to Alfred Byte,
Right.
which had a library at the school. There was a library in the neighborhood, the Queen Victoria Memorial Library. And I would say that my life was transformed by books. That's my life was transformed by libraries. Absolutely.
Interesting. I would say this now, sort of like coming to you, now as a parent, by all accounts, you have raised an amazing son in Kush, and like I think most of Zwita is if there's such a community is really proud of him. I think
Yeah.
one thing that I've just observed, is sort of just, in public transit and in public spaces, how some, parents or guardians have really sort of given the responsibility of entertainment for their kids to phones, just giving these really young kids phones that they are scrolling through and they're giggling, and school going kids, almost everyone in public transit right now is glued to their device. How is
Mm.
it that you think parents can sort of help sort of cultivate this reading culture among the kids? And what do you think the impact of technology will be in the long term to the reading culture in society?
Look, we're all going to always read. It's a
Right.
question of how we read and in what manner we read. What worries me about our reliance on the phones is that we are now able seemingly to consume very small chunks of information. So I'm
Yeah.
sure you've seen on the Twitter community, if somebody dares to write anything longer than 500 words, they're like, Aiwa,
Yeah. I'm sure I'm not threads.
oh, shorten it. So I think that there is something that is happening to the way we consume words in terms of we are losing patience. I think our brains are losing patience. We want to consume small chunks. Even the idea of Twitter's, X as it's called now, it seemed revolutionary at the time, but I actually prefer Facebook, even though I'm no longer there, because you have longer space. You can write a little bit more, and you can also engage back and forth with people in the way that you can't always do on X. But back
Right.
to your point about how parents can help their children stay away from the curse of the mobile phone, I think it starts with you as the parent. If you're that parent who's always glued to your phone, mbuzi kudya umfenje ufana nina, as we say in
Yeah.
Shona. Your children
Mhm.
are going to copy and they're going to follow you. But also, I think it's about knowing at what age your children should have a phone.
Yeah.
Kush and I raised Kush on a series of agreements. I'm an international trade lawyer. So there was the Edinburgh Understanding, the Geneva Accord, the Harare Protocol, the Emirates Mid-Air Agreement on Mindfulness, things like that. So it was always an agreement. And
Yeah.
one of the things I agreed with was that he wasn't going to get any. At that time, it wasn't even about phones. It was about more those games. That he
Hmm.
wasn't going to get all these electronic games until he was a certain age.
Right.
And our negotiation was that in exchange for giving you a game at the age of 12, I'm allowed to dress you until you're 14. I was allowed to choose his clothes until he was 14. And then when he was about 11, 12, he protested. It is like, Mommy, we need an amendment.
Let's sit down.
Let's sit down, let's renegotiate this. And by the way, at that time, he wanted to be a lawyer. I
Right.
think because that's the only way he realized you could beat me. And at one time he even said, Mommy, you keep saying protocol. I bet that's not even a real word. I bet you made that up. But
Well,
yeah, so
it's
I think it's important to decide the age at which children should have access to electronic devices. And the later, the better, honestly. They lose so much of their childhood if
yeah.
they spend it glued to the screen. So I would say just two things. You as a parent, set the example. Like when
Mhm.
you're eating, when you're having dinner together or whatever, just put the phone down. When
Right.
you're
Right.
driving, hopefully people put the phone down when they're driving. Just spend some time talking as a family, as a parent and child, and then set an age at which you think is appropriate for your son, daughter to have a phone.
Interesting. So in addition to these, trade agreements that you have signed, I'm assuming you have given him also, tidbits of information as he grows up being a young man now. Can you tell us, one or two things that you have sort of like nudged him so that he can become a better boy and eventually a better man, as it were?
Oh, that's an amazing question. You know that lovely book by Chimamanda Adichie,
Yes.
Dear Ishmaele, which is about how to raise a daughter. Before she wrote her book, I started writing a letter to my son.
Yeah.
I may still publish it one day, about the kind of man I wanted him to be. And for me, it's obviously he's had the privilege of a fantastic education,
Yeah.
not everybody gets to be educated in a public school in the United Kingdom, right?
Yes. Yeah.
Every child gets to do everything that they ever wanted. His grandmother once said, kuti, Naimi, kushinga ana kumboita zvekarati. And one night, So I
Yeah.
gave him the kind of childhood where he had the opportunity to do pretty much anything that was a passion. He even
Mhm.
collected insects. That was disgusting. That was a disgusting phase. Um, but I think what's really is important to me were to instill the values
Mhm.
that were instilled in me by my parents.
Right.
And one of the biggest values I think that he has, and I'm very proud of, is generosity.
Mhm.
And I think if you're a generous person, you're generous with your time.
Yes.
Uh, Obviously, you're generous with money if you have it,
Yeah.
uh, but you're also generous with your emotions. I think that's something that really will stand you in good stead, because it's the key to making friendships, is the key to
Yes.
relationships,
Mhm.
um, is the key to being a person who has reciprocal relationships, and that's an aspect that's very valuable to me. I don't like transactional relationships. I like reciprocity. I like people who give as much as they take, or take as much as they give. So generosity is one value. Kindness is another value that I really try to instill in him. I'm not always kind. I have to be the first to say that. I'm not always kind on social media.
Of
Sometimes
course.
irritated, I sometimes get impatient, sometimes react in the moment. But it's a value that I try to work on myself. And there's a lovely thing that I've told Kush, that uh, before you say anything, especially in public,
Yeah.
ask yourself, is it necessary?
Mhm.
Does it have to be said by me?
Right.
And does it have to be said by me now?
Mhm.
So ask yourself all those questions. And I would also say, just another value that I've taught him is just to be true to himself and to be independent.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
that's certainly something that I really had to cling to with all my resilience, especially when I worked for the government of Zimbabwe.
Mhm.
When there was an expectation from outside that I had
Yeah.
become this kind of person, and from inside that I had also become this kind of person, but I managed to stick to my to my stubborn self. My father, I think I said this on Trevor, my father said two things. Petina, you want to work for these people? I have two pieces of advice. Stay away from anything to do with money,
Yes.
and always be independent. And I
Mhm.
kept those things, which is what saved me from a lot of trouble.
Interesting. This sort of echoes, an interview that I listened to from the other TB, the famous finance minister, and he said he was also offered the same advice, but I
Yeah,
think in his had a slight twist. He was told, "Minister, make sure what Maritza is accounted for and know the law, because if you're on the
yes.
right side of the law, people will never drag you
No
and
one
say you
can touch.
misappropriated if you're working for the public in the public
Yeah.
sector." So yeah.
And then my late mother, who passed away last year, sadly, she then had a third piece of advice. Usangodya zvese zvese zvaunopiwa.
I'm pretty sure there have been tales of tea at public events,
Don't
and
eat ice
and
cream,
you
right?
know and whether someone has brought their own Tanganda water, or they are going to take the zig, what is it called, ZLG, that's being given by everyone at the function. I
You can
Yeah.
you can always say, "Oh no, I need to get gluten," because
Mm.
gluten is everything.
Aiwa.
Asakati kangu.
I mean, so by my calculations, you had Kush when you were 33. If you were to look back, and I have a couple of my friends who I discussed this with. Some of the questions that young women ask themselves is, should I have my kids early or later? The question really for most of these young women is, do I front the career and then I have motherhood, or do I put motherhood and then sort of the career catches up along the way?
Oh wow, these are great questions. Um, so I had Kush when I was 32, and that was
Okay.
exactly the same year that my father had me as his eldest child. So there's a nice synchronicity, a nice pattern there. But I look at my parents' marriage, and my dad was 32 when I was born, and my mom was 20, right? There was a
Yeah.
12-year age difference, right?
Mhm.
And my dad had become established, or at least he had tried to establish himself, looking after his sisters and his mother. That was his
Yeah.
priority, to make sure
Mhm.
his sisters were independent before he married.
Mhm.
Whereas my mother was just coming out of girlhood, right?
Right.
So
Right.
had
Mhm.
she had a different experience of parenthood to what he had, right? But
Right.
I would say, Tafazwa, it's such a personal question, and so
Mhm.
much depends on a person's individual circumstances. Because you can imagine there's benefits to both, right? Like
Right.
if you have,
Right.
like my sisters had their kids young, like my mom, right? It means that by the time my sister was 40, she had a 20-year-old,
Right.
which is
Right.
also great in its way, you know?
Yeah. Yeah. Mhm.
But at the same time, what my dad and I did, which is to
Mhm.
wait till we're a little bit more established and take,
Mhm.
and in my case, it was also to take care of my brothers and sisters, put them through university and so on. That also
Mhm.
has advantages because then you have resources and everything to focus on your child. Whereas when you are younger, perhaps you have more energy. Do you see what I mean? So I think
Yeah.
it very depends on your circumstances. But I have to say, I love to see young parents. I love to see people in their mid-20s having kids. I think it's always so. Kush, don't listen to this segment. Wait until you're 35.
Of course. Of course. We'll make sure this part doesn't get to him. I mean, you know, I'll move on now to sort of books and reading culture. Your addiction to books is very much well known and well documented, and sometimes. I think you even say the story where you almost got hit by a car while
Yes,
reading a book, and
yes,
and that probably comes to sort of like the addictions of your generation. I mean, your generation was addicted to text and other things that right now our generation is not sort of addicted to. But growing up, what do you think? Sort of like some of the things that you experienced that you think our generation, the born frees, will never experience, and sort of at a loss of not having experienced that part of Zimbabwe or that part of Africa.
yeah. We have to be a little bit careful here, Tafazwa, because your experience in Zimbabwe very much depends on where you are.
Right. Mhm.
I can very flippantly say that the idea of the school run just didn't exist when
Yeah.
I was
Yeah.
growing up, right?
Mhm. Mhm.
Children are being driven to school by their parents and so on, drivers and so on. But that's a
Yeah.
very specific part of maybe Harare and Blawe and Gweru. For
Yeah.
the rest
Yeah.
of the rural kids, they do what we did, which is you walk to school, Munofamba,
Yes. Yeah.
right?
Mhm.
Or if
Mhm.
you're lucky, you have a bike,
Yeah.
right?
Mhm.
Uh, so I would say that looking at the children who are growing up in the kind of milieu that I grew up,
Mhm.
I would say that the biggest difference is the loss of independence,
Mhm.
right? Because
Yeah.
we learned to be very independent very early on, like walking to school,
Yeah.
like playing at each other's houses, and
Mhm.
just the idea kuti unogona kutsiurwa nechero mukuru aripo,
Right. Right.
right? This idea that an adult can actually take charge of another child and say, shamwari, usaverenga,
Yeah.
uchifamba, that kind
Yeah.
of thing.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
And this was everybody from gardeners to teachers to any responsible adult who
Mhm.
would tell you off, right? That's something I think that's getting lost a little bit. This whole idea of it takes a village to raise
Yeah.
a child. We're becoming more nuclear, I think,
Mhm.
and that's not always a good thing.
Mhm.
You know, of course, it's great to grow up with your close family and everything else, but I think
Yeah.
the village element is missing in a
Yeah.
way that I think we have lost something.
Yes.
And of course, the reading. I mean, we used to go to the libraries as chwata. A pack of you would go to the library. Then you'd
Yeah.
finish your library book quickly. I always finished mine on the same day, and then you'd swap with other people who'd been to the library. So that
Yeah.
that element of reading is missing. But again, I'm very cautious to say that people are reading, but they're reading on their phones. But as I said before, the kind of reading that they're doing is very sort of like short bursts and
Yeah.
not really sustained, which is a shame. What else is missing? I would say just the and that culture of respect,
Yes.
right? just respect for elders, respect for other people's property.
Yeah.
We used to have this thing drilled into us as children: don't be a litter bug, don't be a litter bug. And
Mhm.
you'd feel guilty if you saw a piece of paper on the ground. You'd actually pick it
Yes.
up and,
Yes.
put it in the bin, right? And so
Mhm.
we were, even before this talk of climate change and environmental awareness, we were raised to take care of our communities.
Yeah.
And we were raised to believe that communal cleanliness and all of that was part of our responsibility. That's gone. That's just gone. And to me, it's absolutely devastating to walk into any shopping center, anywhere, right?
Mhm.
You see so much rubbish, so much plastic, and this obsession with plastic.
Yeah.
From
Yeah.
the hair we put on our heads to, everything is covered in plastic, and
Yeah.
we don't get rid of that plastic properly. So that awareness that we are one with nature and with our environment is something that I think we have lost to our detriment.
Interesting, interesting. So, one of your fans really asked me this when I mentioned I was going to have an interview with you, but she said, when you get off social media, right, like you did, and she sent me the dates between July 9 and September 2024, when you just went off social media. Do you sometimes miss us, as your readers who want to interact with you? And how do you do that? Do you delete the app, or do you just shut it off and then you just saying, I'm going to write for the next couple of weeks, and I'm actually not gonna sort of engage the rest of the world, as it were.
No, I miss everyone. Because I love, see, what I love about social media is the social aspect, less the media. I
Right.
love the idea of community. And I used to keep my Facebook. I really hate the word followers, but that's what they
Mhm.
use. My Facebook followers, I used to keep them to a minimum number because I wanted to know everyone.
Right.
And I tried to do that at one point with Twitter, but it's it kind of like quickly blows out of proportion. And then
Yeah.
with Twitter,
Yeah.
there's so many anonymous accounts, so you can't really get to know anybody. But of course, I miss people when I'm not on social media. But at that time, I was because I've got a number of books coming out next year. I can't tell you exactly how many, but I
Mhm.
needed to focus, and so that's what I did. I just I would. I would be lying if I said I didn't occasionally, like once a week, just check to see what was trending, what was on, what is Hope watching, what was said this time.
And what is Matigari saying? Of course.
What is Matigari said, my mofu.
Mhm.
So I would check from time to time, just like once a week, just read through. And then I'm on this wonderful service called Kukurigo News,
Okay.
which is I try to buy newspapers, right?
Right.
Like I like go to the shops and actually buy a physical copy of a newspaper, which by the
Mhm.
way I get thinner and thinner. Maybe there just isn't as much news to print. I don't know what's going on there.
It's
Um
capitalism, Petina.
yeah,
They
but
gotta maximize the profit for the
yeah.
same printing.
I tend to buy the Herald, I tend to buy Newsday.
Mhm.
Uh if not every day, then every other day, but I certainly always buy the weekend editions, Newsday Weekend and the Sunday
The
Mail.
Zimbabwe Independent.
Sometimes, yeah.
Oh,
Yeah, but it's very hard to get, bizarrely, independent and Fingas. Because we're
right.
not printing, I think in fairly small volumes. And so by the
Yeah.
time
Yeah.
you go the next day,
It's gone. Yeah.
yeah. And so then
Ringrape.
you get it online or so on.
Mhm.
But my international news is where I'm much more engaged. My
Mhm.
Economist, my New York Times, my The New Yorker. I read The Guardian daily. So when I'm absent from social media, I'm not absent from the world.
Right.
I'm just
Right.
not
Right.
contributing. I'm just not, sort of like doing the back and forth. Yeah.
Mhm. Mhm.
And
Well,
in a way,
that.
I think it's important for people to take the occasional break.
Of course.
Just
Of course.
cleanse, just have a
Mhm.
social media cleanse. Even if it's
Mhm.
just one day a week.
But
Or,
but
mm,
what I tend to see when I talk to people is people say, well, there's this idea that everyone wants to stay updated, right? At the sort of the top of the social hierarchy, as it were. We know of the United States president who, when they wake up, they get to be given this really bound book called the Presidential Daily Briefing, which
Yes.
tells them everything, according to the Americans, everything that has gone wrong in the world while the president was asleep. Now, we are not all, potassies, which means we sort of have to wake up and hunt for the information ourselves and see what has gone right and sometimes what has gone wrong in Zimbabwe or in Africa in general. And so I think you have this thing where people, I think, intentionally go on social media just to get the updates, but then again, they get sucked in, either the toxicity or the comments or the outrage, and it's just, it just keeps going on and on and on. And I would say, even, I think on my account, I used to just balance a diet of, just, websites and news, and then occasionally, almost every week I would read Alex, may his soul rest in peace, the big Saturday read. But then now with sort of like the void of Alex, and for some of my friends with the void left when, Zororo Makamba is no longer there doing his
Yeah.
YouTube show,
Yeah.
people
So yeah.
seem to say they don't have this sort of, platform where they think they can get updates.
I mean, I won't. I'm not saying that I could do what Alex was doing or what Zoro was doing or so on, but there is a space there that
Mhm.
some could fill, right?
Right.
That a
Mhm.
number of people could fill. But I'll tell you what it is. Like I used to do this. What was it like the book of the week or the poem of the week or whatever?
Mhm.
But then you get caught up in something that I call Zim fatigue.
Yeah. Yeah.
You get tired, right? Zimbabwe is right? So this is why I have such admiration for what Alex used to do and what Zoro used to do, which is that they didn't seem to ever get fatigued,
Right.
right? But you need to be able to step away from it, from the
Mhm.
situation sometimes to see it better. And I said the other day something that a friend of mine really agreed with. I said the most fortunate people who can actually live in Zimbabwe are those who are able to leave from time to time,
Right.
right?
Right.
And I
Mhm.
kind of feel that way all about social media, that to really to really use it well and to have a healthy relationship with it, you need to
Yeah.
step away from it. I mean, I'm sure you know about this litigation that I was involved with
Yes.
that I can't talk about because there's other stuff going there with a different dimension to that. But so I
Mhm.
can't go into detail. But it's actually one of my biggest regrets
Yeah.
that I got caught up in this stupid fight
Yes. Yes.
social media and ended up saying some really, like the three things I was saying to Kush, you should always ask yourself, is it necessary? Does it have to be said? Does it have to be said now? None of that needed to be said at all
Yeah.
for any reason.
Yeah. Yeah.
So it's one of my deep regrets. But the silver lining from all of that is that that's also one of the things that helped me shape how I now approach everything to do with social media and
Mhm.
anything to do with what I say publicly on any subject.
Right.
It's
Right. Right.
made me a much more careful person. I
Yes.
wouldn't say censored because that's not really
Mhm.
what it is. And it's not even self-censorship. I'm just more guarded.
Yes.
And
Yes.
yeah, and so for instance, there are three things that I don't talk about anymore on social media.
Mhm.
And I will never talk about them on social media. I will never talk about the Middle East.
Mhm.
I will never talk about the CCC or the opposition or whatever name they want to call themselves. And I will never talk about trans rights because those are not conversations you want to have in the public space where you have 240 characters to make a point.
Right.
Those are conversations you have with your friends in your home when you invite them to dinner or lunch or drinks. You know? Yeah.
I mean, talking of the things that you can still talk about. I hope you can still talk about the role of the church and and sort of the interaction with the state in Zimbabwe. You have said you're writing many books that are coming up, and I think one of them has to do with the church and the sort of the interaction and the experiences of young boys in growing up in the church. But what do you think there? I mean, whether it's sort of like what I call the old churches in, the Anglican, the
The
Catholic,
traditional
uh, you
church.
know, or the sort of these new evangelical, institutions that we're seeing. What do you think there is sort of, the role that the church should play? And do you think the church has sort of, not played that role, or is the church not supposed to be involved in, socio-political issues, to the extent that, they are doing their work in the country?
My gosh, this is probably my favorite subject to talk about now. I had the privilege of, with the Open Society, doing some research on the Pentecostal churches in Zimbabwe, in Nigeria, in South Africa, and Kenya, because I went home. I went away to live in Europe. I came back, and there were suddenly all these Pentecostal churches, and I seem to
And
be the
men
only.
were dressed pastors.
Yeah, and I was like, what? But when it creeps up on you,
Yeah.
like a frog in boiling water, you really see it. So I seem to be the only person who was seeing this remarkable thing around me. So I thought, and with things that I find intriguing, I want to go deeper. So I thought, let me spend some time studying the Pentecostal movements. So I did that, and I came away with some incredible insights.
Yeah.
But then I was also called back to the traditional churches.
Yes.
Christianity has been in three waves in Zimbabwe. There were
Mhm.
the traditional churches, what I, as a decolonization person, call the occupying churches, right? So your
Mhm.
Catholics, your Anglicans, your Methodists, your Salvations, the
Yeah.
ones who make you stamp out your traditional beliefs and take theirs on, right?
Yeah.
So from the traditional churches came the second wave of churches, the
Mhm.
syncretized churches, the ones that grew on African soil.
Yeah.
Jesus
Yeah.
decolonized Mapostori,
Yeah.
Vanasayo,
Yeah.
churches
Mhm.
that you find only in Zimbabwe.
Yeah.
And then the third wave of
Mhm.
churches, which are these
Yeah.
Pentecostal churches, owing very much to the charisma of the head pastor, Makandiwa, Magaya, Ubet Angel, Apostle Faith, so the
And
charisma.
Twabam.
Who's that?
And Passion Java, Twabam.
Passion Java. Well, let's park him for a minute. Apostle Chiwenga. Because I think
And
Passion is to Christianity what I was gonna say Jay-Z, but I don't really want to talk about that whole Jay-Z thing. But what Tupac was to rap is what
right,
Passion Java is to Christianity. So I'm not really sure. I haven't studied him enough to know what kind of pastor he is. But my point
okay.
really is that these churches came in three waves, and
Mhm.
each of those waves has something interesting to say about Zimbabwe
Yeah.
and the way we worship. And I have now gone back to look at the traditional churches, right?
Mhm.
Because I've become a little bit obsessed with uncovering some of the abuse that
Mhm.
happened to boys at my old school, which is St. Ignatius.
Mhm.
Uh, I started writing a novel many years ago. It was too grim, too depressing, but I
Yeah.
picked it up in this year and I've just finished it. I've also
Mhm.
written a play on the same subject, and I'm also working with some of the former victims to try and get St. Ignatius to take this seriously. They've currently announced a commission of inquiry. We're going to
Mhm.
see how that goes.
Yeah.
But I'm also interested in what's happening with the Anglican Church, with this
Mhm.
prolific abuser, John Smythe,
Mhm.
who it turned out was aided and abetted at the very highest levels of government in Zimbabwe.
Right.
So I'm writing a little bit about that as well. So I am interested always in the intersection between uh, institutions, power, and authority,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
When
Mhm.
institutions are too powerful,
Yes.
that's when the abuses start.
Mhm.
Right. So you listened maybe to Archbishop Justin Welby resigning. He's a decent man,
Yeah.
very decent man. But to him, the institution mattered more than the individual. At least that's how I read it.
Mhm.
Um, and when you get churches that believe that being the church is more important than the congregants or the individuals, that's where you get abuse of power.
Yes. 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 Mm. Well, it's a it's a very important subject, even to me as well. Just I grew up also at a Catholic school, in Nyanga, Mount Melody, and then later went to Marist Nyanga, Marist Brothers,
Oh,
and
you
you know
Eucharist. Okay.
Yeah, I went to Marist, and sometimes, I read about all these stories, and I say, my gosh, I was an outer server. I spent so much time with the priests. It could have been me, and it is, you look back and you see how, just lucky you were to have been part of, be associated with the good ones, as we say.
But first of all, I'm very happy you said the good ones, because there are very many good priests, many,
Yeah.
many, many, right? And not every boy was abused. We actually know the rough numbers across the world, right? And we know the rough number of priests who were abusive across the world as well. So I don't want to taint the entire church
Yeah, of
with the
course, of
scandal
course.
of abuse. And in fact, I wrote something for Al Jazeera um, after Archbishop Welby resigned on this subject of what the Catholic and Anglican churches should do to address historic sex scandals. And one of my old teachers reached out to me, Father Nigel Johnson from St. Ignatius, with Father Harold Barry. They invited me to coffee at Emmaus next to the church in Mount Pleasant, the retirement home for priests in Zimbabwe. They bust out the burst China. We had a wonderful conversation, a very truthful conversation, and they gave me some very sound advice
Yeah,
um, on how to approach all of this. And Father Barry said, we just need the truth. And,
yeah,
and to me,
yeah.
that was the most healing thing for them to say
Uh-huh.
that this is in effect a truth mission, right? Just
Yes.
to want to know what happened. We're not
Mhm.
saying people will necessarily go to prison because the statute of limitations has expired and many of these people are dead, but at least to provide some healing to the
Mhm.
men who were boys then, and also to reconcile them to their own church. Some of them have even said we can no longer go to mass because of what
Right,
happened.
right.
So it's a truth and reconciliation exercise. And I said to Father Barry and Father Johnson, because they were part of the Catholic Bishops' Conference report into Kukurahundi, I said, you broke the silence then. Why not break the silence now?
Yeah.
No?
Interesting. I mean, your work touches, some of the most important, important parts of, society and what we are going through as a people. I would say this though, that you seem to be an eternal optimist, as I would say. I mean, by my reading, you seem to always have your bag packed and ready to go back home whenever things start to take a turn. When the GNU was formed, you found yourself back there. You did some great work at the library and worked in the education sector. And then, when the new and the current administration came in, you also found yourself back there, and you helped with trade policy and worked in the OPC. What would you say has gone right and wrong in sort of these two, what I call sort of semi attempts of steering the ship, as it were, in Zimbabwe?
Do you watch the series Succession?
I've heard about it. I haven't watched it.
Right. Okay. It's a wonderful series about a Murdoch type family who run a media empire. They're called the Roys,
Right.
and this series is ultimately about who gets to have control of the company after the old man Logan Roy eventually shuffles off his mortal coil, right? And then at one point he says to his children, "I love you, but you're not serious people," right? And
Yeah.
I love my country. I love my people, but we're not serious people, and we're not serious on either side.
Right.
Um, if we were serious people, for instance, I had this brilliant idea that that tax that they're collecting from everybody who buys chicken in Kentucky Fried Chicken,
Yeah.
for sake, put that towards health premiums for everybody. Just $5 a person. You have a national health policy right there. There are many
Yeah.
who are going to opt out because they're on CMAS or whatever. But for $5 a person a month, you can start to capacitate the hospitals. You can actually have some kind of like national health service.
Insurance. Yeah. Yeah.
Absolutely, right? It doesn't take much, and it doesn't take much imagination to change Zimbabwe. It's such a tiny country, right? In terms of the population. Wait until we get to 50 million, then we're going to have problems. But right now we have a tiny problem. We have a tiny
Mhm.
country, with not too many people and our cities are manageable.
Right.
We're not, I mean, look, Lagos, don't get me wrong, I love you. We're not yet Lagos, right?
Of course, of course.
We will be. And then we're going to have a problem. So all the small town planning issues that we can deal with right now need to be dealt with right now because before this thing becomes too big to handle, right?
Right.
So I would say that one of the things that's gone wrong is that there's just a genuine lack of seriousness about tackling anything really, especially Tunutudiki.
Yeah.
Very small things that can be easily resolved. Like the royalties, the mining royalties. I mean, that's a lot of money. So
Yes.
you could actually have this thing. And when I helped to set up Zida, one of the things we want to make sure is that any new investor who comes in, a new mine or whatever, or if you want to renew your license for your mine, you
Yeah.
do something at a neighborhood school. You build a road, right?
Yeah.
You give something back to that community. These are small things, Tafazwa, that can
Yeah.
be
Yeah.
easily implemented, right? I mean, I've got like 1,000 ideas for Zimbabwe. I just have to, put them all in writing one day. Maybe I'll write
Yeah.
ideas for Zimbabwe. I don't know. But the other thing that seems to me to be going wrong, at least at the government level, is that because nobody really wants to take responsibility for any decision, everything
Yeah.
is collective. And
Right.
I
Right.
noticed this Travis meeting after meeting after meeting after meeting. I've actually to my meetings,
Yes.
and this
Yes.
my God, the conferences, the hotels are busy.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
so I think there's a lot of lack of seriousness in priority setting, and I'm not even beginning to, I can't even begin to talk about what's happening with this 2030 ED Anengaripo. I could have sworn last year I read somewhere that he was saying he was going to do his 2 terms, and that
I
was
think you said it on video as well. I might have seen a video
yeah.
multiple times, but you know,
So
uh,
are they forcing him? I mean,
no.
is he?
Mgoti unopiwa nyerere, mgoti unopiwa nyerere. I mean, wakuru haasi kutozviita izvi, vari kuda kutoenda kunozorora kati.
Kuti andimo. So I mean, so some of this stuff, by the way, is actually very amusing to me as a writer, but very frustrating to me as a citizen, because I
Yeah.
constantly straddle that thing between, oh my gosh, I really love the Gokwe Goblin and the Diesel Nganga, but then as a citizen, I'm like, what? What the hell happened there? Uh,
Yes.
so I'm constantly straddling that line. But yeah, so I would say lack of seriousness, lack of priority setting, and just a lack of follow through and implementation. That's from the government side. From the other side, I'm not even going to begin to talk about that because you end up uchitengwa tengwa nevanu. Kuti
That's
you invited Petina to talk about the opposition. I'm not going to talk about that.
one
But I
other subject.
wish them all the very best because they are working in an extraordinarily difficult environment. And yeah, there's a lot of goodwill towards the opposition in the country, especially towards Nelson Chamisa. It's wonderful to see the goodwill, but at the same time, it's dangerous to
Yeah.
invest so much in just one person. It's dangerous to invest so much in one person. Isn't that the mistake we made in 2017?
We did.